Welcome to Talking with Tech. My name is Chris Bouguet, and as always, I am here with Rachel, the mathematician Madel. How's it going?
I don't think anyone's ever called me that, Chris. In fact, it's always the opposite. I am
You're not a math person?
I'm not a math person.
We like to throw the word yet, growth mindset. If you keep working at it, you can eventually become a math person.
Here's the problem, Chris. I don't want to keep working at it. I hate math. So yes, growth mindset, but that only works when you're really eager to spend time doing it.
So why did I mention math? Well, because just before we started recording, you were starting to tell a story and I said, wait a second, let's record this for the podcast. So you met somebody who does work in math. Let's talk about it.
Yes. So I recently met someone who is actually from Switzerland, and they are doing research out of USC for the next year. And Chris, I feel like I'm going to pronounce this wrong. If the research is on dyscalculia.
That's how I say it? Dyscalculia?
She said it differently.
Like Dracula?
Maybe she's because she's from Switzerland. I'm not sure.
How does she say it in case I'm wrong?
Dyscalculia?
Dyscalculia.
Maybe I did this totally wrong. Maybe I was just listening and didn't say it.
Either way, what is that? What does it mean?
So basically, it's similar to dyslexia, which is interesting because we just had Karen Wilson on who was talking about dyslexia and reading. And so anyway, I was having this conversation and I was really interested in, the overlap. And she said something to me that really stuck. And she basically was like, yeah, like I've been here for the last 6 months. And I have to tell you, the United States does it all wrong when it comes to education. And I was like, wow, like I agree with you. Yes, we do. But she was talking about how, oftentimes we're just, teaching to the test, and we're just kind of having kids, especially when it comes to math, regurgitate formulas. And it was fascinating to kind of talk through this with her, just, given her perspective of being an educator, not from the United States, coming to the United States and teaching educators and seeing kind of classrooms. And obviously everything's been a little different because of the pandemic, but it's been fascinating. I was fascinated talking to her about her experience, and, she basically was like, nothing, that I've seen has been functional, has been engaging. And that's part of the problem that we see, oftentimes that's happening in schools.
I wish I was there because I would give this woman a big hug. This is exactly, if anyone has read my book or parts of my book, you'll know that this is exactly, or come to any of the presentations that I do, this is exactly the first half of the day, if not more, is talking about a redesign of education, because it is so much of a model of well, you know what? How about we do a quick activity? Let's do an activity, Rachel. You and I, right here, we'll ask everyone to participate in it. This is an activity I do in some of my presentations where I say, and in fact, it's in the book as well, I ask people to look up the word quokka. Do you know what a quokka is? Have we done this before? I haven't shown you. All right, so you have your computer up, right? Will you? It's Quokka, quokka.
This is a really interesting looking animal.
Yeah, like it's a little animal, and if you do a Google image search, I just taught you what a quokka is, right?
This is the cutest little animal I've ever seen, actually.
Okay, so would you agree that one really quick way, especially on a podcast about AAC, that you can help someone understand a word that you have never heard before is to do a Google image search, and you will get a visual representation of that word, right?
Absolutely. I do that all the time in my therapy.
All the time, right? So great strategy right there. So now let's imagine you're in your bedroom right now. I mean, we don't have to imagine that. You are in your bedroom. But let's imagine aliens landed outside your window and they come barging in through your door and they say, Rachel, somehow they speak English. They go, Rachel, teach us what a teacher is. On our planet, we don't have a teacher. So could you teach us what a teacher is? And what would you do? Using the same strategy.
Are we the Matrix teaching about teaching?
We are. It's a metacognition. But how would you show them what a teacher is?
Yeah. I mean, I guess I could just show them what a teacher looks like, what they sound like, what they do, a video.
Sure. And well, we just did it for quokka, right? And you just use that same strategy all the time for students, right? So maybe you'd pull up that same strategy for the aliens. So I'm going to challenge you right now, and anyone listening, switch over to your browser and do a quick search for the word teacher and look at the Google image search results that come up. So what do you see?
There's a lot of chalkboards.
A what?
A chalkboard, Chris. I know.
I'm sorry. You're using some sort of word. I'm not sure I'm familiar. Chalk.
Maybe I'll do a Google image search for chalkboard so you can get a visual representation. But it's a very archaic teaching tool that no one uses anymore.
Right. And I'll bet the majority of pictures, scroll through, what gender do you see?
Women.
Mostly women,
Mostly women.
And you said standing in front of chalkboards, right? And this is probably exactly what this person from Switzerland is sort of getting at, is that a traditional educational model would be for students to sit in desks and a teacher to hover over them and spit knowledge at them that they furiously write down onto a piece of paper and then spit that knowledge back out onto a test and then quickly forget that, And in today's society, it just totally does not make sense anymore to do that. Knowledge is freely available. Think about, heck, if you just looked at YouTube or just looked at podcasts or just look at free websites, there's so much content out there that is accurate and valid and truthful. It's not about giving people content anymore. It's about teaching them the strategies to absorb the content and to learn on their own, And that's exactly what she's getting at here. Math instruction for students who have dyscalculia or dyscalculia or really any math is so like, all right, I'm going to teach you what perimeter is. Here's a worksheet that has perimeter on it. Memorize the formula for perimeter. Spit it back out on the test. Let's get our high marks on our state standard scoring, and then let's never really understand how to use that formula in a practical way. So one of the things we talk about, and I bet you she would love this, is flipping that whole concept and paradigm on its ear and starting off with, okay, what's an authentic problem? Well, an authentic problem might be that, people are hungry and there's people that need food. Certainly, that's one of the big things schools have been doing is putting food on buses right now, right? So, all right, well, people need food. How do people get food? What do they eat? What would be healthy? What would be healthy, Rachel?
Salad.
Salad. And how do you get salad?
You have to pick lettuce.
And so in order to pick lettuce, what do you need to do first?
Find lettuce.
Yes. And where do you find lettuce if you're going to pick it?
In the ground.
In the ground. So how does it get in the ground?
We have to put a seed in the ground.
Yes, someone does, right? And so how about students? We put seeds in the ground. Now, how are we going to put seeds in the ground? Do you know how far lettuce seeds need to be back away from each other? How would we find that out so that they grow efficiently?
I would Google it.
There you go, right? So now we're doing research. We're reading about planting. We're reading about, we've got that. Okay, where does the math come in? Well, how far do the seeds need to be apart? Well, let's measure that, how far that is. Well, how much area do we need? And oh, by the way, how are we going to protect those things? Because you know what? People have been planting lettuce for a long time. And guess what? Guess who else likes lettuce?
All of the bugs that eat all of the plants in my backyard.
Yes, and the deer and the rabbits and the gophers and wherever you are. So we have to put up a
fence.
And so what do we need? Perimeter, right? Now, the students are same concept. It's not a worksheet of doing perimeter, but because they want to feed people, because they're learning about sustainable food, because they're learning about health, they're reading about it, and now they're doing the math because they want to do the math. I need to figure out perimeter, or the deer are going to eat my project. The deer ate my homework.
Yeah, I love this. I'm like so engaged. Like you were just teaching me all about these math concepts, Chris. And you know what? I do like math now. Maybe I just didn't like it because the way I was taught.
I really feel that way. That's so much of the reason we struggle with math. We joke about it all the time as speech therapists and people listening is that we're not good at math, but actually we really are because we do data collection all the time. But it's not of someone who's good or bad. It's that our instruction was not really designed in a way that made us find that it was meaningful. If that continued on, like I'm using a real simple concept because everyone understands perimeter to an extent, I bet a lot of people don't. They just kind of eyeball it and make the fences, do you know what I mean? Rather than actually measuring it out. Because they didn't really internalize it. But conceptually, anyway, people understand that. But if you just scaled that up from year after year after year, what was still trying to solve some sort of problem, the math would make a meaningful sense to you as you got higher and higher in the math,
Right, because it's anchored in something that you can understand. and some type of practical application. And I think that was always my biggest issue with math is like, I just had to memorize a bunch of formulas and I'm not really great at memorizing things. And so like math was always hard because I would get all the formulas like jumbled in my brain and I didn't have anything to anchor it into.
Mm-hmm. And then it's sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy here because as soon as that little imp on your shoulder starts whispering in your ear going, you're not good at math, you're not good at math, you're not good at math, you start to feel that and you start to hate it. And now, I always say this too, like you and I, we could choose tomorrow, Rachel, you and I, my wife and I make this joke all the time. Like when we're frustrated with school or we're frustrated with our jobs, we could decide to change, Rachel, we're starting, like, my wife and I always use this, but since you're here, you and I, we're starting a chocolate factory. We have decided we're quitting this podcast. We're quitting speech therapy. We're going in the chocolate factory business. We could do that, But students don't get that choice. They have to go every day to school doing things that they have now. The imp keeps whispering to them that they're not good at, and they're forced to be there. And it's this downward spiral of, sucks, this sucks. Oh, it's terrible. You can't see me, but I'm getting lower and lower and lower as the weight continues to pile on students. And so instead of like, well, what's a way we can make that better is hey, maybe they could, instead of doing the math and having to memorize it, let's change fundamentally how we do math instruction so that it isn't doing worksheets. And so it's not saying, well, here's a fake problem. No, let's make it a real problem that kids are invested in. Then school becomes a place you want to be,
No, absolutely. And circling back to kind of the idea of growth mindset, I didn't feel like I was good at math. And I always told myself I wasn't good. And then I feel like that has stayed with me my whole life. And it's just, it's interesting to think about if my educators had taken a growth mindset approach to teaching, then I feel like I probably wouldn't carry that around with me. Right. But it's funny how these things are set foundationally when we're younger. And it's not until you like think back on them, like I'm doing right now, that you realize, wow, like I really did like tell myself I was bad at math. And then, I still tell myself that.
Yeah. I can't wait to get through this class. I did it. I memorized what I needed to memorize. I had the abilities to do that. Imagine now you have a disability that impacts that. So it's even worse for you. And you don't have a choice. You have to be there. Oh, and by the way, if you're not doing everything someone tells you to do, then you're the bad kid, right? Yeah, you're not sitting up straight enough. That's your fault, or your handwriting's not good enough. It's your fault. You can keep feeling like this negative spiral. And so the way we change that is to fundamentally change the instruction, and I would add, being an advocate for technology here, talking with tech, we have the technology to help us do it. What does it mean? Well, first of all, I'm sure people have heard this before, but I'm sure when you were a kid, your mom would say, or your dad would say, no, you have to learn how to do these math facts because it's not like you're going to have a calculator in your pocket all the time. But we do have calculators in our pocket, and even more so than that, right? I mean, did you hear that when you were a kid?
For sure. It was like, no, don't use a calculator. You will rely on that tool. It's the same thing we were talking about with my client. Remember, we were talking about the the text to speech, and the client was like, no, they'll rely on it. We all have tools literally at our fingertips at all times.
Yes. And not even our fingertips. I mean, yes, our fingertips, definitely that, but it doesn't stop there. Because I know what my daughter does. She says she's working on her math problem, and she'll go, again, a math problem that makes no sense. She's just doing, long division to what? For what? I don't understand why she needs to do it. Busy work to say she can follow a formula that she'll never use again, because what she will do in her life is she'll say, hey, and I won't say it out loud because it'll set off everyone's device, but hey, Alexa, what's blah, blah, blah divided by blah, blah, blah? She has no idea why she's doing that, right? And that is what I'd much rather have her do is plot out the garden and go, okay, there's some formula here. It's perimeter. How do I figure out the formula? I got to measure each side, and now I don't know my multiplication facts. Hey, Alexa, but I know I need to use a multiplication. And because my teacher taught me that, meaning I had an experience where I had to use this before and then go use the technology to figure out those calculations, That's the key is with the tech, where you can literally just say it to the air. And AAC users can say it to the air. We know that AAC users can use other devices, and it responds to those voice assistants if you set it up the right way. Well, the trick is learning how to ask the question and know what questions to ask.
Absolutely. I feel like we could talk about this forever, Chris. Like
Yes.
you and I could just keep chatting about this. We're both really passionate about it. And I think it's really important to talk about and think through that lens. I know we have a lot of educators who listen to this podcast, and I think it's important to remember we have the power to make things engaging, exciting, and relevant and meaningful to the kids that we work with. And the same thing, like we can inspire teachers to, create lessons. I'm constantly sharing resources and tools and ideas with my friends who are educators too. So we can, all come together and make things more engaging and more exciting and more useful.
So real quick, let me give a tool for people to try here when it comes to math. Once upon a time, there was a Google extension called GMath. And the person that put it together had this idea that, okay, we're moving in a digital space, and so much math is done with paper pencil. How do I move it into a digital space? And so he created this Google extension where you could essentially draw or write on or type into Google into a Google Doc using this extension, and it would convert the math for you. And the math that was purchased by a company called TextHelp, and TextHelp is the makers of Read and Write for Google Chrome. Full disclosure, they are sponsors of the Nightlight Stories podcast. My wife and I do that other podcast. And our school district uses Read and Write for Google Chrome. So I know this company very well. And one of the tools that they have, when they took this GMath and they purchased it, they created a new tool in collaboration with the person that built GMath, and it's called Equatio. And the reason I bring it up here on this podcast in context to math is that it's an attempt to not just make math digital, but to make it accessible so that you can turn your math problems into, so even if you were doing it like old school worksheet sort of way, one barrier for people with dyscalculia is, well, I can't hit a play button and have that math read out loud. So now you can hit a play button and have the math read out loud so you can hear what the math is. So if you have a visual processing difficulties, that might be part of why you're kind of messing up the math. Well, now you have a different modality to experience it with. But then also there's a input modality where you can, again, write on it, type it, or use your voice. And I have not tested it with AAC, but if anyone wants to try that, that would be an awesome thing to do, is see if it would recognize your voice. I think it would, because it's really robust. But I haven't tested that. But that's to say, it's a cool tool to check out. And I believe, I got to knock on wood here, I believe it's free for educators. Where they ask for money is when you start using it with students. So if you as an educator wanted to check it out, I believe you can check it out for free.
I'm totally going to check it out, and I'm going to play around with it.
It's Equatio, so it's like the word equation without the N. So you just do a Google search for Equatio and take off the N at the end for equation, and you'll find it.
Awesome. Chris, what's our interview today? I'm so excited.
All right, so the interview today has nothing to do about math. This is one of the speech therapists that I work with here in my school district, in the school district that I work with. Her name is Shawnda Saul, and we started an initiative last year called the Learning Language AAC Initiative, and she was one of our coaches. You've heard us talk about coaching on the podcast before. I do sessions on coaching, and we've talked about coaching. You and I have done sessions on coaching. And she has been one of our coaches. So her and I kind of got on and talked about what the experience is like for her this towards the end of the school year when we went distance learning, talk a little bit about telepractice, and then her experiences being an LWAC coach, a Learning Language with AAC coach. Shawnda and I go way back because when I say way back, there was this great moment when I first actually met her. We're in a very large school district, right? And so I was just sort of facilitating this whole group discussion with all the speech therapists. I'm standing up in front of an auditorium, talking to all of them, talking about AAC and language many years ago. And at one point, I was feeling these moments of doubt, like inside. I hope I wasn't showing it, but I don't know, are people getting this or not getting this? And Shawnda raised her hand and she said something that just brought it all together for me. And I didn't know her. She, we're a large school district. So I had seen her maybe in passing in the hallway, but I hadn't met her. And immediately, we met, and there was this meeting of the minds, like, oh, you and I, we are on the same page here, right? And so ever since, we've worked together kind of remotely and follow each other on social media, and then started working closely together with this in this coaching realm. And so just having her come on the podcast and chat for a while was it's a great honor. So I think you're going to really like this interview.
Well, I love coaching. So anything about coaching and AAC, like I'm excited for it because I think we can all learn from each other too. And I think as we've talked multiple times on this podcast, coaching communication partners of AAC users is ultimately the most important thing that we can do as clinicians, making sure everybody feels comfortable using the device and uses the device with the children. So I'm really excited for this interview.
Me too, especially here in the age of distance learning, as people are continuing to work through that. And of course, we've been big advocates for that. Maybe this is a model that could really work from now on. Why ever go back? And so maybe this interview will help you. So without further ado, here's my interview with Shawnda Saul. Hey there! If you love listening to this podcast, we would be so grateful for your support to keep it going. By becoming a Patreon member, you can not only help us cover the cost of this podcast, but you can get some really great bonus content as well. We post video tutorials, behind-the-scenes recordings, and bonus segments from our interviews. We would love for you to join us by going to patreon.com/talkingwithtech. So welcome to Talking with Tech. My name is Chris Bouguet, and I'm here with the fabulous Shawnda Saul. How's it going, Shawnda?
It's going great, Chris. Thanks for having me.
So Shawnda, let's talk about our history a little bit here and how we know each other. So we both work for the same school district, have for many years now. But you and I have only recently, in the last handful of years, really gotten to know each other and work together. Was that about it?
That's correct. I have had years before seen your name on many reports, but never really worked with you or met you until really the last year and a half.
Yeah, really. Now, but you have had an interest in AAC, and let's talk about this. You're a speech-language pathologist that is working with schools and with students and with families right now. Is that accurate?
That is accurate.
And you've had a vested interest in AAC for a while. So let's hear about your history with AAC. How did you get interested in it?
Well, so my very first job as a speech pathologist was in a school system, a really small rural school system, and I didn't really have any opportunities to work with AAC. And then I worked for another school division, dabbled a little, and then I was in private practice for a few years, worked as a contractor at a private school in the District of Columbia where I did more literacy. And then when I moved to Loudoun, I was at a school where I would say out of the 10 students in a self-contained class, 8 of the 10 really had no functional language, and they were starting elementary school. And so all of a sudden I found myself really needing to know AAC. And then once I started needing to know it, I really liked learning about it. And that's how I got here.
So let's talk about, this is being recorded in the middle of the pandemic. I don't know. I keep saying the middle. I don't know what the middle means, really. It's happening right now. And you've been providing services to students and families in a telepractice sort of way, right? So, Shawnda, here's what I kind of want to pick your brain about and hear your experience about, if this is okay. I sort of made this claim, and I've sort of convinced myself of this notion that I'm about to explain. And I'd like you to either support it or refute it and be like, well, Chris, that sounds great in theory. Now, I'm the boots on the ground that's actually doing the work, so I'm going to tell you the real story here, right? So here's the sort of claim that I've been thinking. We've been working together with sort of a coaching model in teaching communication partners the skill of partner-augmented input. So how can they get better at modeling on a communication device? And you've been doing that as one of the people that, and you've been doing that as a speech language pathologist, but you've also been kind of a coach this past year where that's been part of your role, has been to work with teachers and other therapists on how they can build that skill. So I think here's my claim, right? Traditionally, most therapy and most time we spend with students is a direct service model. I've been saying maybe 80 to 90% has been I as a therapist, I as a teacher work 80% to 90% of the time with a student. And the 10/20% of the time is in some sort of coaching/consulting role. And we'll get into the difference of those two. But the idea is that I'm working with another teacher, or I'm kind of teaching them how to do it, or their family, or in some cases peers. But that has been, people can't see us right now because it's audio, but we're recording the video. It's this small little piece most of it has been this direct therapy instruction. So now with the pandemic and going to telepractice, I've sort of made the claim that maybe we could swap those roles. That if people are home and they're home with their families, they're home with their siblings, they're home with their parents, and if the parents can find the time to move away from their own work that they have to do and all the other responsibilities they have, maybe we can shift that number so that it's 80% of the therapy is actually in a consulting coaching role, and 10% to 20% is, okay, I just need you to let me do this with them. You watch while I do this with them and provide this direct therapy because I have this skill that I really want to dig into and draw out of the student. So that's my claim. That's where my head is at. That's what I've been trying to sort of promote. What do you think?
So I think that you're correct. I think that we absolutely, and not only can we do it, it really has been for a couple of my students fantastic, like having that opportunity to have access to their family in secondary, where I am primarily now, middle school and high school. I sometimes only see a family once a year at an IEP meeting, and we're going over a lot of information. And so we have like this much time people can't see my hands, a teeny amount of time to talk about, kind of how things are going, and families are busy and life is busy. And so, when I only get to see them face to face, other than phone calls, that one time a year, I have a limited amount of opportunity in order to coach the families. And I think that you're absolutely correct that using this time to be able to work directly with the families has been really great. I think there are always going to be outliers and barriers. Like I did have students that didn't have parents at home, and I worked with a sibling. I will say I was like blown away with how fantastic these older teenagers did in the home with their younger siblings. I just am in awe that they were able to manage everything. So it was really an opportunity for me to get to see close in their homes, and then to kind of learn a little bit like how the family dynamic worked, and then how what I would like for them to do could fit into that.
So let's talk about AAC specifically.
Yep.
Can you tell us some stories where you worked with AAC in a telepractice role and what that looked like coaching versus, doing direct therapy?
Absolutely. So I'll do one real specific one. It was a student that the teacher and I had often kind of lamented, like, oh, we wish that they were using it at home. We knew that the device wasn't used very often at home. We couldn't quite figure out why. The parents seemed supportive, but we knew it wasn't happening. And then, so the first time I was able to, come into their home in terms of teletherapy, the device wasn't with the student. And I'm like, oh, I'm here for the device, here for where this is part of what we're going to do. And mom got it, and she sat with the student, and he immediately started requesting snack and food, and that's part of his school day too. I want bread, I want candy, I want pizza, I want French fries. And mom said, this is why we don't use it at home. I can't take this, I can't give him all of this food, so we just put it away. And so I had prepared and I'd never done teletherapy until like those days. Like it was like, okay, if we're starting, and today you're a teletherapist. So I brought a lot of things that I used for regular sessions that I knew worked well with my students. So I had bubbles, I had a couple of preferred games. So I'm like, well, let me bring out some things. I'm like, let's just not, put it away. So I brought out bubbles, which had been highly reinforcing for my student. And I had my device at home. So I modeled on my device, I want bubbles. And immediately my student, I want bubbles. And Mom, it was like fireworks and rainbows, and she was like, I can't believe that he just didn't ask for food. He has only ever asked for food, and he drives us crazy. And she got so excited. And I'm like, oh, wait, there's more. So after that, we did big, and we did, and she was so excited, but it hadn't really occurred to them, one, just how to kind of move away from the food. So, and then they were able to, just by watching me model, and then I'm like, well, what else, what does he like at home? What do you guys do as a leisure activity? And he liked the trampoline, and that, so I'm like, well, so that could be, we could use descriptors with that. We could use, and she came up with ideas on her own. So it was really, quite remarkable. And it really was like eye-opening for me, because, we had talked before, like, oh, you use it at home, use it at home, use it at home. And I knew that it wasn't happening, but it really was because it was such a, was such a bother with the whole perseverating on the food. And because of that, it was, like a behavior at home, and to kind of open up the world and give some replacement. And then it really just kind of took off from there. So it was, by far my favorite part of getting to have this experience with the teletherapy.
Well, I got to say, Shawnda, so that story does not sound atypical, meaning I bet you there's a lot of students that have learned that AAC devices mean I request things that I like, and that is mostly food, right? That it's often used as a reinforcer for getting food, and that's where it is stopped. Meaning the language process, or the language progress has gone from elementary to middle to learn to request food to kind of plateau, and that's where we are. And it does not also surprise me for parents to say, yeah, okay, that is getting in the way of our life, and so I'm going to just put that away. That all sounds like really typical to me. It is also not surprising to me that that traditionally we have said, okay, well, we'll give a communication device, and just think about how much training and work has gone into teaching teachers, right? And we still find like that we're working to increase the number of minutes teachers model on those devices as being a big part of what our initiatives have been over the last couple of years, especially this past year. It's really the teachers using the device, and we, again, you in that coaching role and the other coaches, we realize that it's not just training, it's not just putting a device, but it's actually someone being there to reflect and to brainstorm with, that has been able to maybe get us even closer than ever before. And it sounds like what you provided to this parent, is that if you only saw them this teeny bit of time at an IEP meeting, and you sent some emails even, or sent little notes home, that is not enough, or even the right amount of, or not amount, even the right type of feedback that they need. But then being in their kitchen with them virtually, that's what they needed, right? To move it to the next step. So that is such an exciting story.
Thanks. It was really exciting. I was so happy because we had, even we'd had multiple phone conversations, and it really had not come up. And I think part of it was like, they wanted it to work, but when it was, in a busy house and there were 3 younger children, it just, it wasn't working. So to have all of a sudden to have access to one another, was really exciting. So I was so glad to see that I was able to help. And then I think that removing that barrier, and even I had another mom too, that once the student and I were working together, and she was there, and she was like, I didn't realize how much her student could do. So that was really exciting. So it really made, the investment from the families, like, okay, I didn't realize, like, I didn't, it was really exciting.
Shawnda, let me ask you, what are some surprising things that came up? As you said, you've never done telepractice before, suddenly it's like late March, early April, you're right, maybe mid-April, you're like, okay, you're a telepractice therapist now. What kind of preconceived notions did you have, or what kind of surprises did you have? Or when you reflect back on it, what are your thoughts?
I think at first it was kind of like, well, what do I do? Like, what do I have? What do I have that is already here? In my home, I was doing teletherapy, not from my school and from my room. I was doing it from my house. So like, what do I have here that's going to be engaging enough? And then what do I have that's going to work, at the student's home as well? I did spend some time just kind of thinking about when I talked to the parents, like, kind of those ideas, like what works well as a leisure activity at home. What kind of things do you guys do outside of the school day? And that did kind of help drive the planning for the sessions, because then I was able to pull different activities, if they were really working on trying to do independent cooking, and then so I'm like, oh, that's something we can do. Like we can work on some language around the cooking and something that they're already doing at home. But it definitely took me a minute to kind of like think through, like, okay, we're not going to be playing, game. We could play games, but it took me a minute to think about how it was going to work.
Mm-hmm. Did you find that, pre-COVID, I was, 80-90% direct and 20 to 10%, any sort of conversation or coaching? And did you see the needle move in a different direction? And what do you think about that?
I think the needle did move in a different direction. I think part of it was just the parents have, like, once they were watching a session, it really helped with their confidence. I do think at least among my AAC users, some of the parents and family members didn't have a ton of confidence in their skills in terms of being an AAC partner. And when I showed, I had my device, I'm like, the modeling part of it is you're going to use the device. And we found ways that it didn't have to be one more extra thing. That was huge. And it was definitely, prior to COVID, 90 to 99% just all me, and we would talk about it and I would, give ideas, but I think that was me giving a directive as opposed to like, here's some ways that it could work and more of a coaching role.
Mm-hmm. So did you see like more families and more family members start to do the modeling?
I did.
That's great.
Yes.
Right?
It was really exciting. It was, like I said, the one that was huge. It was huge for them. I think that was really empowering to know that they like had the skills and that they're like, oh wait, we can do this. So it was huge.
So, and you're talking to parents and you talk about modeling. We have talked about modeling for maybe years now with in the schools. But one of the things that we really focused on this year was to provide an acronym for teachers to kind of have a shared language around, and for something that would break the skills of modeling down into even more concrete and miniature steps. And so we looked at s'mores and we looked at Master Pal from Tabby Jones-Williber, s'mores being from Jill Center and Matt Baud. And we went with s'mores as the acronym that we were going to use. And I mentioned Tabby's Master Pal because I think that could work just as well. But the idea was we picked something and we used it for teachers, and we said, we're going to learn these languages, we're going to practice these terms, we're going to know what the S in s'mores mean, we're going to know what the M is, we're going to practice that over and over again, we're going to build up that skill of modeling. I'm curious, when you're working with families, did you use the actual term s'mores or Master Pal or something, or did you just use the general term modeling? And if you did or didn't, would you have changed it, reflecting back on your work?
I didn't, but I do think I probably will going forward. You know, I think that it might be, you know, it's just kind of nice to have something concrete to attach it to. So by using the acronym, I think having like, oh yeah, there's that reminder, like, oh yeah, Shawnda told us about that. Like she wants us to, so I didn't, but I think that I would going forward. And I really, you know, wasn't sure how it was going to go, like whether they, you know, would sit my student down and, you know, walk away. And, but really I had a lot of, really invested families, and they were really anxious to see me. And so they stayed right there. So I think that they were really ready to take in information and try to make it work at home. So I felt really fortunate, but I did not use the acronym that we used when we were working with teachers, the s'mores, but I think going forward, I would do that.
You might. All right. Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Now you also mentioned, because I really, this is intriguing to me. And I feel like it's the evolution of where we need to go. There's, Caroline Musselwhite talks about communication circles and the idea that you would pull peers in and you would work in teaching them how to be good communication partners, not in a caretaker sort of sense, but in a good friend sense. This is what good friends do, right? And it sounded like you were doing that a little bit with some of the siblings. I mean, those are the people that are going to be in the environment, in the kind of quarantine environment. And so can you talk about that a little bit? What was that peer interaction? Well, I guess it's not peer, sibling interaction like?
Absolutely. So, you know, the siblings, I had one student in particular that was being cared for by an older brother in high school. And I don't think that he'd had a lot of opportunities to play around with her device. And, you know, he was given a directive by a parent when he was home to caregive, like, okay, you know, at this time, like Mrs. Saul's going to be on the Google Meet and you've got to make sure she's on there. And so he really wanted to try to help. And then once again, like we did some turn-taking activities, and he got super excited about it to the point where the student was like, hey, like.
Miss Saul's mine, not yours.
Yes. And I will say too, just I do a inclusion club at one of the high schools I service, and we did meet virtually over the closure, and you know we will continue in the fall since we're distance learning, and we met every week. And I do have 2 AAC users in the group, and I wasn't sure how that was going to go. Like, and I have been super, really super lucky that I've had. Every single time I've had students that join the group that really either have an interest in speech pathology down the road, or they want to be a special education teacher, and they're always like super excited to sit with. And our group is not planned. It's always, well, I mean, like it's not. We always try to find things that teenagers like to do, not necessarily teenagers with disabilities. Like we've spent a lot of time trying to find things that we can all do together that are not specifically designed for students with disabilities. So we have gone to football games and basketball games and school plays and volunteered together. But I wasn't sure how that was going to, because it was all so active, like translate to a meet. And it really was, worked really well. Like we did play a couple of games. We played like a win, lose, or draw game. We did play like a headbands type game, but I had to send out ahead of time like what people were going to be. We also played like just some like conversation squares, and I was really excited that my AAC users still came every week, and they still participated without having, you know, usually I would have a peer that wanted to sit with them and was modeling, you know, like making sure they were part of it. They came and they were still active parts of the group. So I was excited about that.
So that is fantastic. What plans do you have for the upcoming school year? Is the Inclusion Club continuing? And how often do they meet? And then what kind of stuff is being planned?
We meet every week. And so part of it is, planned by the students. It'll be, there are definitely weeks where I'm just a facilitator and someone will say, I've got a great idea. I want to see if this will work. And I'm like, okay, let's go for it. That's how we ended up playing win, lose, or draw. Like one of the students said that she'd played it with like her volleyball team or something. She's like, I think this could work for buddies. Like, let's try it. And so she sent out, ahead of time. So some of it, I'm really just the facilitator and the kids really own the group. So, that happens a lot. I think we'll have to be creative, like as we keep moving forward to find things that are fun and keep everybody engaged, as we continue to meet virtually. But it's funny, we stopped in June whenever school, was finished for the school year. And I probably get at least a note or a text or something every other week, like from both the, my kids that are coming, as typical peers, and like, are we starting back up? Like, do you want to just go ahead and start back up since we're not in the building? Should we just start back up? Like,
that is so great. That shows how valuable it is, right?
Yeah.
Have you done any, or are you planning on any like communication partner, again, s'mores or, something specific to AAC, or is it more just like, we're going to play games?
So mostly it's been, we're just going to play games. We have done, when we went to, before the closure, like when we went to, like the homecoming, football game together, we did do a little bit because most of the kids, I also, see them for speech therapy too. So we had done a little bit of like pre-planning beforehand. But they, they're pretty, great about bringing their devices, and they are kind of excited when they know they have something to say when we're with the group and we're going somewhere. And same like when we went to the school play, or when we've volunteered, we do t-shirt sales every year in order to raise money for our club. We've also volunteered. We did a drive for the animal shelter, and then we went there. Sometimes doing philanthropic activities are nice because a lot of my students have been volunteered for, but don't get to be volunteers as often. So they really like, being the person who's the volunteer.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I just think, this is such a big push in our neck of the woods, and I feel like it's such a good push for the country, is the idea that school itself, is built around authentic learning experiences. And your inclusion club that you're the facilitator for, that's exactly what this sounds like, is like, here's this authentic experience that everybody gets to have. And I also feel like if you asked any educator, any student, what they really missed most about being in school, they'd say, what would they say, Shawnda?
They would see their friends.
It's totally social, right? It's the social aspect. And so this inclusion club, it's not surprising to me that you've got students contacting you going, when are we starting it up again? I mean, I get to see my friends. I got to be with my buddies. It's that's so awesome.
Yeah, it's huge. And they've even, like, I know one of the girls, like the three of the girl, like they went and again, like before then, they got their nails done together, and like two, they're like, oh, we picked her up, we all went, they really, the friendships they're doing real, regular teenage stuff. Like it's, so it's nice. It's not, the friendships that are very authentic, and it's been really wonderful.
Again, not like a caretaker, just we enjoy being together. So we're going to be together. We're just going to be friends. Yeah.
We're teenage girls and we'd like to get our nails done. So we're going to go do that together.
Yeah, so great. All right, Shawnda, so what are you next year looking forward to? Our school district right now, is planning on starting the school year at distance learning. So you're going to be doing telepractice again. What are you most excited about? What are you looking forward to at the start of the school year?
Oh, gosh. I'm looking forward to, I've been trying to, we're using a different platform for delivery services. So I'm kind of excited to play around with that and see how that works. I'm excited. I've been doing some planning with some of my teachers in programs to try to really make it so that working together. So it's not like, so speech isn't isolated. Like some of those students didn't have synchronous sessions for their classroom, but they were having synchronous speech. And then this year will look a little different, that they'll have synchronous classroom sessions. So I'm excited to be part of that again. I really like being part of their classroom and part of their classroom community. Yeah.
Well, and I mean, that is someone who runs the inclusion club, not being included in those sorts of things has got to be hard. So looking forward to being included, everyone together, that's got to be exciting.
Yes, I'm excited for that.
Cool. Well, I'm also very excited to hear how things progress throughout the school year with regard to the coaching of the communication partners, family members, siblings, parents, grandma, grandpa, whoever happens to be there. I'd be very interested in how that continues to grow and what you think your percentage is, or actually if you track it in some way, like, beforehand, like you said, it was 99% direct, and now we're more, whatever the new percentage is. And I wonder about really never going back. Like maybe that's the, if that's more effective, because like clearly in that story you told, the AAC device was not effective at home, and if this had not happened, I don't know that we would have ever gotten them through it,
No, and I don't.
Assumption they're using it at home.
Right. That progress, like it was, we felt like we were kind of stuck. So I think having having that opportunity to be at the home and was huge. It really was, kind of like broke through that barrier.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. So maybe that's just the way we design it from now on, is that we focus a little bit more, if not way more on the coaching aspect, and getting those communication partners up and running, not just a kind of a one-off training on here's what the device is, Yeah. Cool. All right, Shawnda, thank you so much for taking your time today on your summer to spend some time here on the podcast and talk about your experiences and share your awesome stories and your expertise. Really, really appreciate it.
No, thank you for having me.
All right, I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks, Chris.
Please listen carefully.
Hi, I'm Matt Hott, one of the hosts of Speech Science, a weekly podcast bringing you all the information that you can handle related to speech sciences and disabilities. Michelle Wintering, Michael McLeod, and I interview leaders and difference makers in the field. Every Tuesday, we drop a new episode. You can find us on iTunes, Android, and on our website, www.speechscience.org/Speech Science Podcast. Join us as we try to find the answers to the question,
what is communication?
You're listening to the Exceptional Podcast Network.